Welcome in, everybody, to GC Live Talking Tuesday. He's intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva, and it is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024, which means we are just a week away until the Gamecocks report to fall camp next week, August 1st. South Carolina will report. They'll hold Media Day. Hasn't officially been announced yet, but that is what we've been told. And practice number 1 is expected to be held on August 2nd. So once it becomes all official, whether that be at the end of this week, beginning of next week, we will put that out there. On top of that, Birdies with Beamer is set to take place on Thursday. What does that mean? Well, obviously there's a media golf outing, but more importantly, to folks like yourself watching and listening, what that means is we'll have another opportunity to listen to Shane Beamer talk. And in addition to that, as been the case in years past, a lot of the assistant coaches typically make themselves available to speak with the media once Shane Beamer meets with us first. So they'll have the golf outing. Beamer will speak for a little bit last year between his opening statement, which I don't think he really needs to give that much of an opening statement after having SEC Media Days just a week ago, but he'll answer some questions. It was about, 22, 23 minutes long last year. So get about 20 minutes of new Gamecock content for you as football season quickly approaches. All right, what's on the docket today? Well, a couple things. One, we're going to get into a couple players offensively, returners who we believe are flying under the radar. Just wrote a story about that today on Gamecock Central. Let us know who you think is flying under the radar as far as Gamecock returners are concerned. So many new faces, wide receiver room, right? There's a lot of players, too, though, that are back that make this offense special. So we will get into that. On top of that, talk a little about the schedule as well. Take a look at some of those games for USC since the season is just over a month away. It's crazy to think about that. And then we will address the elephant in the room at the end of the show. Made the announcement last Thursday that I'll be moving up to Rhode Island, what that means for Gamecock Central as far as what I'll be doing moving forward. I'll have a new role. And how this is different from last time when I went up there and I freelanced up in Boston. So I will address that. And any questions that you guys may have about that as well. Joe, having said all that, let's get into it. Offense. I put my 3 out. You had a chance to see it. Maybe there's a player or two that you agree with me, so that's okay. But to you, name a player. We'll kind of just go back and forth here. Who's a player offensively that you just feel like has been going under the radar? People aren't talking nearly enough about as we head into this new year.
Yeah, Mike, for certain, there are a couple players on this offense that are being overlooked. One of your guys that you wrote about, this week was Josh Simon. Really stuck out to me. But not to steal all your guys here, I'm gonna go in a different direction. I'm gonna go with Gage Larvadane. I think, he could be big. Tyshawn Russell also could be a big, help in this wide receiver room. This wide receiver room is wide open right now besides Nick Harbor, right? We don't necessarily know what, all the transfers are going to look like in Garnet and Black. And so it's just a matter of who steps up. But I think Tyshawn Russell is one of those guys that, could sneak in there in the lineup as one of those third, fourth guys out in the pass patterns. He developed really well last season, right, Mike? He goes for proof of the staff of, how they can develop players, and with all the, ups and downs that wide receiver room had last year, Tyshawn Russell was one of the most consistent faces and was one of the better players as a true freshman. So I got Russell. I mean, he's being overlooked a little bit. I think he can make some leaps and bounds and is really going to round out this wide receiver room really well.
No, it's a good pick. It's a good pick because when we looked at that wide receiver room, I think we did this exercise, whether it be a week ago, 2 weeks ago, when you looked at that wide receiver room heading into the offseason and how much different it looks like now because of the additions via the transfer portal. I think there's 5. And then on top of that, you add in 2 true freshmen, Mazio Bennett being one of them, Jabron Gatlin being the other. So from a scholarship standpoint, I know I've been a broken record with this stat, but it's the God's honest truth and one that needs to be repeated over and over, I feel like, which is that room, scholarship-wise, more than 50% of those faces in that wide receiver room will be new as far as guys on scholarship. So the question marks But we talked about this with the linebacker room in particular, Joe. You mentioned how, you look at that room, it could be a strength of theirs. There's no question. But at the same time, too, as you brought up, and it's fair to bring up, that is looking at it with wishful thinking, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have players coming in here who have done some good things at other schools. Can they replicate that, though, at this level in this conference for this team? Plain and simple. So as far as wide receiver goes, yeah, they need someone to step up via the transfer portal who's just got here, right? And you mentioned Gage Laverdine. Obviously, he's someone new to the room, but he's someone that could be stepping up. But like you said, as far as guys that are going to be back, Tyson Russell, he's been going under the radar.
Yeah.
He's going under the radar. If we talked about that wide receiver room, say, I don't know, first or second week of December, okay? First or second week of December. Tyson, I'd say, would be one of those guys that arguably could have been one of those top 3 wide receivers just based on who was in the room at that time. He has experience in this offense. He understands what college football is all about now, having played a year of college ball. And he did some good things, as you mentioned, in the limited time that we saw him get in last year. So there's no question that when you look at that wide receiver room, and I know some will sleep on Luke Doty. We've talked about this before too. Doty's one of those guys who can be more of a security blanket than anything else because he brings a quarterback mentality, a quarterback mind to a wide receiver room, and he can really help out a younger quarterback like Lenore Sellers. No question about that. But I think that a guy that, and we'll go back and forth here, but a guy that I mentioned, and you said his name, that for whatever reason, it just feels like he's not getting talked about like at all. All.
No,
And
I
that's
know.
Josh Simon, which really just baffles me because when you look at last season, 28 catches, 256 yards, 2 touchdowns, appeared in all 12 games. He wasn't expected to be the guy in that tight end room last year. Last year it was supposed to be Trey Knox. Now, Knox got banged up a little bit in preseason camp, and then he also got hurt a little bit towards the middle of the season. So I never felt like Trey Knox was really as healthy as he needed to be the Trey Knox that we expected him to be. He did some good things. But more importantly than that, Joe, I think it's because of the inconsistencies that we saw on the offensive line. It forced guys like Knox, it forced guys like Simon to be used in a different way than, or used more as blockers, right? That's not to say they weren't going to be impacting the run game, because they certainly were going to regardless, but I felt like we saw more max protection looks to help Rattler just get some extra time to throw the football. So do you think that's probably one of the reasons why he's flying under the radar, is just simply because people are looking at what he did last year and they say, all right, well, he was blocking more. Well, that's because of the issues that were going on with the offensive line and what he had to do to help the team.
Yeah, I think that's one piece of the pie, right, Mike? And I mean, also you factor in Trey Knox. He was the starter and brought in to bring up a guy like Josh Simon. But I think if you also factor in the Brady Hunts and kind of the depth that they've added to that room, people forget Josh Simon's there, and I think he's going to be one of the bigger weapons on this offense, as you do, Mike. Because again, you look at his size, you look at his speed, just a prototypical SEC tight end and really can do both, can block. We saw his ability to block last year and was blocking more last year than he was, out in pass patterns. But I think this year it's going to open up a little bit more now that you have a healthy offensive line again, knock on wood, as we always do on these shows. But, I really think Josh Simon is going to be, a breakthrough player and also help all those young guys that are in that room too. He was a great leader, as was Trey Knox. And so, I think he's just passing it along, that leadership, but taking on a leadership role in that room. And, I expect big things out of Simon, and then also that room too, with him at the helm.
Yeah. And again, if you're just joining us, the topic to begin today's show, which South Carolina returners, players that were here last year, not the new faces, because there's so many, whether it be freshmen, whether it be players from the transfer portal. I've been sharing some of the players that people have been mentioning that wouldn't fit the bill of what we're talking about here. But like Oscar Attaway. Oscar obviously is a transfer coming in, but we'll throw Oscar up there because there's no question that there's going to be some guys that are coming in via the transfer portal that will make an impact for this team. But as far as returners are concerned, that is where we're looking at today. So we talked about those two players. We'll kind of snake draft this, and I'll throw it back to you after I give another one here.
Yeah.
Casey Henry. You look at that offensive line, and if you've been paying attention to these GC Live shows all offseason, if you've been paying attention to some of the stuff that we've wrote on Gamecock Central, especially about the offensive line, it's deeper. There's more talent. There's more versatility. What do I mean by versatility? There's guys that have the ability to play multiple spots on that offensive line. Lonnie Teasley has talked about it in the spring. I've talked to him away from the cameras about it. They're doing more cross-training than in years past. That's not to say they didn't cross-train last year, but look, bottom line is this, Joe. South Carolina, God forbid they ever get into a situation like what we saw last year with that offensive line. No one's going to look at it. I mean, there were some people that didn't look at it this way, but people will not make excuses for it this year. You can at least look at it, and I think a reasonable person can look at last year and say, well, you know what? The offensive line, man, that doesn't take everything away that South Carolina did wrong last year. Defensively, they had their issues, no question about it. There were issues in the running back room at times. So, like, that doesn't just negate things completely, but at least you can look at it and say, all right, I think even Nick Saban mentioned it at SEC Media Days last week. But if that happens again this year, again, God forbid they go through injuries, no one's going to look at it and say, well, they're going to say, well, why weren't they prepared for it better this time around in comparison to what happened last year? You can at least understand to an extent. Now, like we mentioned, steeper, there's more talent, all that stuff. That's great. But being able to cross-train players and just be more prepared for those moments, right? We talk about the quote all the time, one of my favorites, Mike Tyson, everyone has a game plan until you get punched in the face. Well, South Carolina got punched in the face multiple times. They got punched in the face in the spring game with Jalen Nichols tearing his knee up, that ACL, so he was done. Casey Henry gets hurt in the first series. He hurts his knee against North Carolina. And then, obviously, there were multiple injuries after that. So, Casey Henry, a guy that was the starter last year, is a player that this coaching staff, I know for a fact, absolutely adores and loves. He's going to have an opportunity to compete for that starting right tackle spot. Now, if he, for whatever reason, isn't the same Casey Henry that he was heading into last season, and there's some other guys that are playing well, especially in the middle, and someone could, potentially get kicked out to right tackle, right? Yeah. I'm just making up hypotheticals. Vershawn Lee, he's played practically every position on the offensive line. He's a guy that could play right tackle if need be. So it's not like, all right, Kaysen, hey, you're back. Here you go. Here's the keys. No, he has to still earn it. But he's someone that I just feel like this offensive line, this offense as a whole, people aren't talking enough about Casey Henry simply because he didn't play much last year. He only played in 2 games, came back in November for that November 4th game against Jacksonville State, got re-injured, and that was it for him for his 2023 season.
Yeah, Mike, I'm not as high on Casey Henry as you are, but one guy I am pretty high on is Michael Smith. I think he gets a really good shot. I've heard good things about him in the weight room, that he's put on a ton of weight.
Not a returner, but yes.
Yeah. I am gonna throw some freshmen in there. I mean,
it's okay.
I think, Mazio. I mean, we talk about Mazio Bennett every week and his competition and how that's gonna add value to that room for sure. But Mike Smith is one of those guys that's certainly being overlooked simply because I think he's gonna see the field like quite a bit based on just how he's adapted to this college system. I mean, he looks night and day difference from when he got on campus. And, with that size and that kind of quickness, I mean, we could see him, be that third tight end and rotating in, for Brady and Simon as it goes along.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. Just want to make sure, because some people be like, wait a minute, Michael Smith, he wasn't here. Yeah. Nope. Michael, actually, one of the few players, Jalou Solomon being another one that just comes off the top of my mind, who was not here in the spring. But Michael Smith, certainly a player who I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see guys like Michael Smith, Fred Johnson. I know we've talked about Wendell Gregory in the past. We're talking about true freshmen. I mean, that's something else we can mention in here. I mean, there's some talented freshmen that are coming in here. I think the biggest difference, though, with this year's team in comparison to last year. Not everywhere, but you look at a lot of spots, there's more veteran presence, there's more experience in comparison to where the experience was last year and where it lacked. Certainly at the linebacker position, that's a position it really lacked in. And as the season went on, injuries piled up here and there. Didn't help Mo Cobb getting hurt first week of the season. But the inability to throw people in there to be able to help out guys like Debo Williams or help out a guy even like Stone Blanton, who was playing with a bum ankle for most of the season, it felt like. You can't just expect true freshmen to come out there and play right away. I think that was the case last year with Pup Howard in a lot of ways. So, obviously I mentioned Pup, I mentioned Stone. Those two guys in particular aren't here anymore, but South Carolina was able to do a tremendous job of flipping the room with players from the transfer portal, but also bringing some talented guys in that linebacker room, Fred Johnson being one of them, as well as Wendell Gregory. And then, of course, on the other side, we're talking Michael Smith here. There's going to be opportunities for some of these freshmen. There will be. No question about it. Another player, Joe, and I don't know, again, we probably would be have some of these players that we'd both agree on simply because we're talking about returners on offense. There's only so many. We could talk about some of the offensive linemen.
Yeah.
Vershawn Lee, I think he's vital simply because if he is the starting center, seemed like, all right, well, maybe he's going to play guard. Torricelli Simpkins will play center, which it possibly could play out that way still. But it just feels like the more and more we hear things, at least heading into fall camp, that Lee will likely have the first crack at it at center unless they feel like, it gives them a better chance by having him play a different spot, by also being able to get Simpkins out there. But the point being is if Lee is the center, his value, which he still has a lot of, goes up even more because he has a young quarterback in Lenore Seljan trying to help him out. So I don't think he's necessarily flying under the radar, but certainly an underrated player, no question about. I think the last player I'd mention is a guy that's not getting talked enough about, a returner on offense, is DJ Braswell. When you look at what that running back room is and what South Carolina has been able to do this offseason, adding 3 players via the transfer portal, right? Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway III, and Juwan Howell to go along with a very talented running back in Matthew Fuller, who's a true freshman. It's easy to overlook a guy like Braswell. Now, I know Juju McDowell's also in that room. He's come back from an injury. But Braswell did some good things, not just last season. I really liked what he did in pass protection as a true freshman. He had to step up because that room was banged up. Once Juju went down, and then you throw in Dakereon Joyner, who got banged up towards the end of the year, they had to burn Braswell's red shirt. And Braswell didn't complain. He didn't gripe about it. And he went out there and he played. In the spring game, he did some good things, hit the hole hard, didn't have any rush attempts that went for negative yards. I think Braswell is one of those guys that, he might not necessarily be the workhorse. He might not even be the number 2 back. But I do believe he will make a positive contribution to this offense, and we'll see plenty of meaningful snaps this season. But he's just one of those guys that, again, because of all the new shiny toys in that running back room, he gets overlooked.
Yeah, I'm sticking with the running back room there too, Mike. I think Braswell can make a big difference, and then Juju McDowell as well. As much as we talk about Oscar Attaway and Rocket, I think those two guys are essentially playing for that third spot. Even though Juwan Howell has also made some waves too, so it's a really crowded running back room. It's just a matter of who steps up. I think Braswell could be up there. And same thing with Juju. But Juju's more of a situational back, right? I think we've talked about that a lot this offseason. So maybe not being as overlooked as other guys. But again, Mike, it's the same effect with Juju, right? So many shiny new toys in that running back room. So it's a tendency to overlook it. I'm glad you brought up Vershawn Lee. We talk about him often, but I think his impact is going to be understated as we get some thunder there. But yeah, no, he's going to be a crucial part for this offensive line. And, it goes without stating, the young quarterback thing with Lenore is you need a leader on that offensive line. And with so many new guys, I'm seeing Josiah Thompson being brought up in the chat too. with so many new guys on that offensive line, you need one or two veterans to really hold it down. And I think Vershawn Lee's that guy, and they're looking for him to, number one, stay healthy, but two, lead this offensive line to the promised land.
Yeah, look, when we talk about guys who have made an impact at South Carolina, when you look at what happened in the offensive line last year, it's easy to overlook a guy like Vershawn Lee. No question about it. I think the ones that pay attention closely, they understand his value. But offensive line as a whole, it's easy to overlook some of those guys. But when you talk about the fact that South Carolina is going to be going into a new season with a new quarterback, having an experienced guy on the offensive line can help you out. And the other thing, too, about it is, South Carolina had to play musical chairs on the offensive line last year because of those injuries. But Vershawn Lee was making an adjustment at first. When he moved over to center, that was the first time he had ever played center. So last year was also a learning experience for him. Having said that, because of injuries, he got moved around, he got shuffled around, and eventually they finished the season with Nick Gargiulo. We've talked about it before. Gargiulo was one of those guys who, despite having a busted hand towards the end of the season, and we saw just how much of a factor that was, and he talked to me about it, the way he had to grip the football. You saw it in that Clemson game, not being able to get, I think it was like 2 snaps, they didn't come up, just because he had to grip the football higher up on the nose of it to be able to grip it, because his hand, he just couldn't squeeze the football the same way because of how busted up it was. He was still their best option. That's how the coaching staff felt, simply because of the lack of depth and just the fact of, we talk about cross-training. Guys were cross-training, but Gargiulo still gave him the best shot, they believed. So that's one thing. Morgan, I'm glad you brought this up. I'm curious to see how Marquee Anderson mixes back into the fold when healthy. Glad we have these problems. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing. And again, I get it. I totally get it. I'm heading into my 9th year of covering the Gamecocks, heading into my 10th year of covering the SEC. I understand that it feels like it's a broken record with certain positions, and just talking Gamecock football as a whole. When we sit here and say, well, this offensive room, this offensive line, man, there's some talent, there's some depth. And then naturally there's going to be people that will say, well, let's wait until we have to see it. I hear that every year. I get that. Totally understand that. At least on paper, that's all we can do right now. That's all we can do. I mean, we have a job to do. We're going to have to talk football, right? We're talking football before the season starts, and people are excited for football, so we're going to talk it. You guys are going to listen. You guys are going to weigh in. That's why we appreciate it. At least on paper, with the players that they were able to accumulate via the transfer portal, with the players that they've been able to recruit over the last couple of years, because of some of the circumstances last year, Marquee Anderson, of course, going down, but I'm talking about Luatosin Babalade and Trevon Baugh having to step up and play as true freshmen. They earned some valuable playing time last season.
Yeah.
So in the moment, we look at it as a glass half empty moment, but heading into this year, it's a glass half full. Why? Well, because they were able to gain valuable playing time as freshmen. So the thing with Marquee, and again, we talked about, don't forget about, Case and Henry, how he was the starter heading into week 1. Don't forget that Marquee was originally on that travel list as a true freshman last year for that week 1 game against North Carolina. Not every true freshman made the trip. Marquee, of course, didn't make the trip, but that's because of his injury. Shoot, I don't think, I'm a mini hoarder when it comes to all the Gamecock press releases and programs, and you go cover games. I typically keep a lot of that stuff. I don't think I have it around me right here, but I remember vividly that Marquee was on that travel list. Like that's how close he was to actually traveling for that first game of the year. And then he got hurt at the very last minute. So I bring that up to say, yeah, don't sleep on Marquee. Marquee, unfortunately, tightened up a little bit in that spring game, which was another reason why poor Robbie Ashford was running for his life. I think he only threw the ball once I mean, it was one of those things that South Carolina, the black team for the spring game, they weren't able to do anything just because of all the injuries that were going on as a whole with the offensive line. But Marquee, yeah, I hope he's healthy. I hope he's healthy simply for the fact of I want to see what this kid can do healthy. And number two, that competition on the offensive line, it only gets better. I mean, there's going to be competition at multiple positions, and we can get into that next Tuesday. I think that will be good. A couple positions that we're paying close attention to. We've probably talked about some of them in the past this offseason, so some of this stuff becomes repetitive. Good reminder, though, episode. That offensive line, Joe, man, if Marquee is healthy and Marquee can be the Marquee that he was before he got hurt heading into that week 1 game, man, he could certainly be in the mix to compete for a starting job. No question about it.
Yeah, no, Marquee's a good pick too. Again, just got to stay healthy, right? We know him as a recruit, what he was able to do. Really high powered kid. So if he can get on the field and stay healthy, it's going to be a problem for other teams, right? Because then you have that. It's the Great Wall of Carolina, right? That's been hyped up, and Marquee was certainly part of that. And then you factor in Tree, Troves, Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, all those guys that came in this year. So he's certainly a very big part of your vision for this offensive line. So you need him to stay healthy. And I think with back issues and with guys that are that
procedure. Big. So Craig Godwin asked, what was Marquee's injury? Sorry to cut you off, Joe, but because he's been hurt a long time. He had a knee procedure last year, required surgery, and then he had some back issues. Back tightens up occasionally. I don't know if it's one of those things that will continue to be an issue heading into the season, but that was it locked up on him, I think was the exact phrase that Shane used following the spring game.
Yeah. And you cut me off at a pretty good time because again, with a back injury, right? It's something you got to worry about with those big boys.
Think of Larry Bird. Think of Larry Bird. I mean, let's use Larry Bird famously. I know it's basketball, but he's a tall guy, right? I mean, basketball guys are freakish size and everything, and obviously Marquee's got a little bit more mass on him. But the point being is Larry Bird, that back hurt him so bad that, number one, he had to retire early, but number two, it got to a point where he had to lay down on the sidelines. I mean, famously laying down the sidelines and not sitting on the bench. So I'm not saying that to concern people. I certainly believe that on Thursday, Marquee will be asked, will get brought up, whether it be to Shane. If not, I'll ask Lonnie Teasley myself. I'm sure it'll get brought up, though. But how is that back? Is that an issue? I mean, you think of knee injuries. Yeah, knee injuries are a big problem, right? I mean, that's important. But at the same time, too, back injuries, especially if it is one of those things, and this is what we're trying to gather more information about, because I can't sit here and say like, oh yeah, I know for a fact. If it is one of those things that just flare up on them occasionally, I don't know what you can necessarily do. I mean, unless you have procedure. I mean, I'm not a doctor. So, again, that's one of those things anyone that's ever had back pain can tell you. I mean, that's no fun. I mean, it can change everything. I mean, it just comes in waves sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the back is certainly nothing to mess with no matter like what size you are, but these big boys, right, can be fragile sometimes, man. One wrong step, one wrong move one way, and it's a tweak and it's out for a couple weeks. So you really, really got to be careful with these big boys. And I think with Marquee, they're doing exactly what they should, right? In the spring game, his back tightened up at the beginning, and so you didn't run him, right? You didn't let him go in the spring game. You put him out and put him into recovery for the back. So I think it was smart deactivating him for that, and had the way that they've taken Marquee and this injury, up until this point has been really good. And so again, you just hope that they've done everything right to this point, and he should be good to go into the fall after summer camp.
So the question is, for Manis, who are y'all thinking the starting O-line would be if they spotted the ball today? So I did a story about this a couple weeks back. I did like my week 1 predictions for offense and defense, and that's available on Gamecock Central. I'll drop that actually right here. I think some people got concerned a little bit because I didn't have Rocket in week 1, simply because like I've mentioned before in the past on this show, I think it's best to just ease him into things, coming back from a shoulder injury, let him get acclimated, right? Let him take some hits in practice, but also know that, hey, there's some talent in that running back room. You have a big one the following week against Kentucky. Obviously, you don't want to, take your foot off the gas against Old Dominion because you don't want to get Virginia Tech 2.0'd, but you should be able to take care of business week 1 against ODU. And if that's the case, not having to use Rocket that much would be ideal. It would be ideal. Get him acclimated. Let him get some run time out there. But the other running backs in that room, I think you can ease into things. Having said that, offensive line, and this is the beauty of it because there's just so much competition that it's tough. It's tough to truly figure out, okay, who's that guy? Like, who's going to be this guy and who's going to go in this position? As of today, at left tackle, I'll go from left tackle to right tackle. I have Big Tree at left tackle. I have Bell at left guard. I have Lee at center, Trevon Baugh at right guard, and Henry at right tackle. Keeping Simpkins out right now for me is tough because that is a guy that's getting a lot of attention in the NFL. Like, he's going to get in there. I just don't know where. The more I hear about Bell, that's why I flipped it, because heading into the spring, and Simpkins still had a really good spring, they are loving Bell. So the question now becomes, a guy like Baugh, a guy like Big Tree, how does that impact you? A guy like Simpkins or even Anderson, right? Marquee Anderson come in. Never mind the fact that Josiah Thompson has been putting on a lot of good weight. He was weighing about 264 in January, according to the All-American game that he played in. And now he's up to 300. So, the thing about it is nothing will surprise me about the offensive line. And the reason being is this. We look at those guys that I mentioned. That's great. Okay, that could be a great offensive line. You look at it from an individual standpoint. What does it look like as a unit, though? Right? What does it look like as a unit? Because a guy, we'll just use this as an example. A guy like Trevon Baugh, he was an All-American last year. Is he the best option for this unit if he's going out there and he's doing good things, but they're not playing cohesively enough? And you put someone else in that spot, I'm making it up, Simpkins, and they're able to get things going. It's like, okay, so there's going to be a guy or two or three. I mean, shoot, we mentioned Josiah Thompson, even though he's a true freshman, there's going to be a guy or two out there that we're going to look and say, man, like, how isn't he out there? Never mind the fact of, Ja'Kai Moore. I mean, he's another guy who's been dealing with injuries throughout his career. He has a lot of experience. There's going to be some really good competition in that offensive line room. Like, I'm excited about that, because when you look at what Spencer Rattler was able to do last year and what Xavier Legette was able to do, as frustrating as it was at times watching this offense, the reason was because they didn't have consistency on the offensive line, number one, because of all the injuries. Number two, they didn't have consistency in the running back room, dealt with some injuries towards the end of the year. To start the year, you had a guy like Mario Anderson who was still learning what playing SEC football was all about. Guess what? This year, you have depth at both offensive line and the running back room. That can help out your young quarterback. You need guys to step up in the wide receiver room. But those two positional rooms look completely different from a year ago. You give Spencer Rattler that offensive line room, the way that it looks like on paper, and the way that running back room looks like on paper, my goodness.
Night and day.
My goodness. I mean, South Carolina, even with that schedule, my goodness, South Carolina would shoot, dare I say, 9 wins. I say 9 wins, if not more. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too carried away. I'll say 9. I won't say more. 9.
Yeah. Mike, the only spot I disagree with you is that right tackle spot. I don't think Cason Henry is that good. I think he's, very injury prone, and I think Simpkins could slide up in there, or, one of those freshmen. So I think there's a lot of options. You just got to stay healthy. Cason Henry needs to stay healthy if he wants to have a chance to start. So that's the only disagreeing point I have with you there. But, they're really high on a lot of guys in this offensive line room. So it's going to be interesting as fall camp progresses.
Yeah, the old saying, you can't make the club if you're in the tub. If you can't stay healthy, if you can't stay on the field, if you're too much, You're dealing with the ice bucket, the ice bath. That's what they said, the tub. You're not going to be able to make an impact. So hopefully Kayson's able to stay healthy, because guess what? If he's healthy and there's some good competition and another guy beats him out, that's always a good thing. That's always a good thing for the team. So we'll wait and see how things play out. Speaking about beating things out, talking about the schedule, South Carolina, of course, will open up the year against ODU. And I'll have my official release on what I think the Gamecocks will do this year record-wise. But I think one thing that's interesting, Joe, one thing that's interesting is when you look at the schedule, as you pull it up right now on the screen, Old Dominion, and then at Kentucky, LSU, Akron. Let's look at those four to start.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let's look at those four. We'll kind of break it up 4-3, and then we'll do the back half after the bye week. So you look at Kentucky. I think a lot of people would agree that that game is truly going to set the tone for the season. And when you look at, because we all do it, we're all guilty of it, I'm sure. When the schedule first came out, naturally you go through the list and you're like, all right, that should be a win. That should be a win. That could be a loss. That could be a toss-up. Like, that could be this. Like, I mean, shoot, going back to probably the days of playing youth football or, youth basketball, whatever the case may be. I think we're all guilty of doing that. So I bring that up to say, when you look at this, I understand why fans would look at this and be like, man, like, I don't see this many wins. Like, I don't see that. I get that. I think what makes me feel better about this schedule, as tough as it is the fact that South Carolina, just like every other team in the country for FBS, they're going to have 2 off weeks. They're going to have 2 off weeks in the regular season. And when you look at where those breaks come,
So
massive.
Close.
It's massive.
Yeah.
That gauntlet of a schedule in October, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma. Yeah, that's tough.
Well,
it's tough. It's tough. And then you're able to catch your breath a little bit, and then you play Texas A&M. So let's go through it, okay? Old Dominion, that should be a win.
Should be a win, yeah.
Kentucky, yeah, that's a toss-up. It's both teams fairly similar. You're playing on the road at a place that you won the last time you were there. You've beat this team the last 2 times. Won't be easy by any means, and it's also a nationally televised game on ABC.
Exactly. Early in the season too, Mike.
LSU, yes, LSU. The thing about LSU is this. I know some people aren't fans of his. I am a Brian Kelly fan. I like what he's like, because I feel like wherever he goes, he's been able to have success. Yes, he wasn't able to bring a national championship to Notre Dame. I get that, but he's a good coach. The problem is for LSU, they're losing their 2 top wide receivers and they're losing their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, on top of the fact that they just replaced their entire defensive coaching staff, which also included a former Gamecock assistant coach, Jimmy Lindsey. So I bring that up because defensively, how quickly will it take the Tigers to be able to figure out what their identity is going to be defensively? And they're just on the same page. Is that something that they're just going to be able to pick up quickly? We talk about how Kentucky is a week 2 matchup, right? LSU, you're playing them week 3. And oh, by the way, that game at noon in Columbia,
it's gonna be hot.
It's gonna be a hot one.
Steamy.
So, look, Louisiana, yeah, I get it. It gets hot down there, but obviously it doesn't get as hot as it gets here. That could be extremely beneficial for the Gamecocks. I don't even want to know or imagine how Beamer is going to prepare these guys for that game. I'm sure that they'll tackle some things in fall camp to try to prepare for a game like that. Even a game against Old Dominion, that's a 4:15 game. That will still be hot in August. My goodness. So I look at those games, and then obviously Akron as well should be a win. This could be something where South Carolina goes 2-2. They could go 4-0. They could go 2-2. They could go 4-0. They could go 3-1. Am I crazy to believe that, Joe? And people watching,
No,
let me know. Am I
not at
crazy to
all.
believe after looking at Kentucky and LSU? Do you see that? Do
Yeah.
you see that they could beat both those teams? Just because, again, LSU, yes, phenomenal team. Phenomenal team. You look at you see the ranking next to them, right? Like, I get it. I get it. But at the same time, too, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of question marks. And Mark Anderson says, I'm sure LSU will be prepared for the heat. I'm sure they will. I'm trying to find some type of positive spin on it because I know not a lot of people, rightfully so, are happy about attending a football game at noon in September at Williams-Brice. Woo.
It's not fun in the student section, Mike. Let me tell you, noon kicks in September. And that's brutal, too, being from the Midwest. I mean, kickoffs at noon were usually a little bit chillier. But no, I mean, Mike, I don't think it's unrealistic to think you're 4-0 through this stretch up here at the top. I think Kentucky's certainly a winnable game, and then LSU I think is chance for a big upset. If LSU finds a way to win their first 2 weeks, they're going to come into South Carolina undefeated. Being as hyped up, LSU, all of the jazz, Brian Kelly, all of that. I think, that is the most upset prone game on your schedule. I mean, besides Ole Miss, right? I think you could come out of there 4-0. You should win or beat at least Old Dominion and Akron. I think Kentucky might be a little bit more of a trap game than people think. Because again, it's on the road at Kentucky. It's early on in the season. Kentucky really hasn't had the chance to, either give up on itself yet or, start to find the rhythm down the stretch like they've done in years past. So, that game being as early in the season as it is, it scares me a little bit because I don't know if either team will have found their identity or know their identity, completely at that point. So again, it's more of a toss up than anything. I think you've got a better chance of beating LSU at home than you do Kentucky on the road, which feels crazy to say. But again, with everything that LSU's losing, I think they're overhyped. And again, Brian Kelly's a tremendous football coach. But I don't think they have enough to get the job done. When you look at, Williams-Brice Stadium, it's going to be packed. I mean, the lights won't be in effect because it'll be a noon kick, but another ABC kick too. And if you can do the unthinkable, right? Which, I mean, it's not unthinkable because, we're talking about, it's certainly a real possibility, but if you can do that on ABC, man, people are going to be talking about you, especially if you can beat Kentucky the week prior. So, I mean, if you end up 4-0 through these, the first 4 games of the season, Mike, you are going to get a lot of national attention, and you're probably ranked too.
Well, shoot, back-to-back weeks playing on ABC, and depending on what Kentucky does week 1, you would expect them to be ranked heading into that week 2 matchup against the Gamecocks, LSU, in week 3. Yeah, look, I don't fully agree that the LSU game would be easier. I mean, I don't know what way you'd phrase it. How did you phrase it? Did you say easier?
No, I didn't necessarily say easier. I think there's more of an upset probability.
Okay.
With LSU because again,
you are playing at home. You are playing at home.
Playing at home. They've lost more than Kentucky has, right? And I think you're more evenly matched with Kentucky. I just think LSU's really overhyped this season with everything that they've lost.
Yeah, we'll pay attention to it, but again, they have to go out there. They have to execute. They have to get these things done. But it's not crazy to believe that South Carolina could start off 4-0. But again, it's not crazy to believe that South Carolina could go 2-2, and dare I say it, even worse if they do struggle for whatever reason. Now, before we talk about Ole Miss, you have that bye week. You have that off week at the end of September. For a team that, number one, has a young quarterback, but number two, are trying to figure out who the hell's going to be in that wide receiver room. Like, who are those 6 guys that are going to step up? Because Beamer's talked about it in years past. He mentioned it at SEC Media Days, trying to figure out who those 6 guys are going to be. At that point, the 28th, you have a week to be able to regroup a little bit. Knowing that there are some talented young guys in that room and new faces via the transfer portal, you could have a guy like Mazio Bennett, who, I'm making this up, but let's say Mazio, okay, maybe he's towards the bottom of that top 6, or maybe he's right on the outside looking in. But then he has that bye week to really gather himself, and then he takes off. I don't think it's crazy to believe that there could be some young players who will really benefit from this. And certainly, that goes without saying, your quarterback, Lenore Sellers, he'll be able to take a step back. You don't have the luxury of really being able to do that other than once during a season. You have a chance to do that twice now during a regular season. You have a chance to really take a step back and regroup. And the fact that you're going to be able to regroup before you head into the second month of the season is massive. And I'm counting on August 31st as, September here because of just how close it is. You have a whole month of football, and then you have a bye week, and then you go into another one, and then you have a bye week. So depending on how things go to start the season, whether it be 2-2, whether it be 3-1, whether it be 4-0, right? Certainly, if you have a record of 3-1 or 4-1, definitely, and you have a bye week, and you're coming back home against an Ole Miss team who will likely be at least in the top 10, at least, unless they, crap the bed before they play you. If that happens, guess what? Old Juice Wells is coming back into town. That place is going to be rocking. I think I said this on 107.5, Joe. I remember when Johnny Damon came back and he played the Red Sox as a member of the Yankees, and he was coming to the plate, and Fenway, just from the top row and just going on out from behind home plate all the way down to the foul poles, they had just fake money, and everyone was just making it rain from the top deck, just letting it rain down because Johnny left for money. Imagine if Williams-Brice did something like that, just the students, just fake money, just raining. Now, granted, that was one of the reasons why he was trying to leave. Did it play out the way that he thought? No. But that was the thought process. But I digress. Point being is, depending on how things go those first 4 weeks of the season will strongly dictate the type of momentum, number one, but number two, the energy from that crowd. The crowd's always great. We know that. However, you struggle, you go 1-3 and you're coming off a bye week. I wouldn't blame fans for not wanting to be there as much. But if you're 3-1, you're 4-0, you're coming off a bye week, people are itching for some football after not having football in their lives from a Gamecock standpoint the week prior, that place will be absolutely electric. And you'll need everything to be able to beat that team, because I think defensively South Carolina can slow them down, but being able to keep up offensively with Ole Miss and having that bye week the week before can certainly help you. I still think that if you had to ask me today, I'd probably pick Ole Miss to win that game, just because I think they're one of the better teams, not just in the conference, but in the country. I think defensively, certainly they have had their issues over the last couple of years during the Lane Kiffin era, but offensively, they can put up points. And even though I think that defense of South Carolina is really, really good, you're going to have to keep up. You're going to have to keep up in some shape, way, or form. I mean, look at what happened last year against Clemson. All right, defense did their job. Obviously, there was a defensive touchdown by Clemson's defense, but even take that out of the equation, the offense just wasn't able to do anything. You're going to have to put up points against Ole Miss if you want to win this game. You're going to have to put up a
lot of points.
I'd say you're going to have to put up probably in the 30s.
Oh, at least.
At least.
I was thinking 40s. I mean,
the reason why is
in the 40s.
The reason why is I think South Carolina defensively, and I don't have the schedule for Ole Miss in front of me, but I think at that point will be one of the tougher defenses they have seen, at least heading into that game. So Ole Miss is a team that we know that can put up 50 points, 40-plus points. I think it could be one of those games where if you score 30 points, if you're South Carolina, if your defense is truly as good as you believe they can be, that you have an opportunity of winning that game. But again, I think it's just going to be tough. Alabama the next week, it's crazy looking at Alabama, and I'm not trying to downplay them because they're Alabama. But this is the first time in a long time that Nick Saban won't be coaching them. I think Alabama will still be a very tough opponent, but I think by that point of the year, man, we're going to have a better idea of what Alabama is all about. Does the beat still go on, right? Is Alabama still that team that people look at and, I don't know if fair's the right word, but they look at the same way that they once did? Or do they start to have some hiccups along the way and you get to October 12th and you head into Alabama thinking, all right, they're still going to be a tough team, but this is a team that has shown leading up to this game. Again, I'm talking in hypotheticals, that if we can play some mistake-free football, we can give ourselves a chance. So, again, I'm not trying to do mental gymnastics here. Like I said, I still think Ole Miss and Alabama, I think those two games, if you had to ask me today, I'd probably pick both those teams to beat South Carolina. But we'll have to wait and see. And then I'll mention Oklahoma, and then I'll get your thoughts on those three, Joe. Yeah. Oklahoma, to me, I don't know what it is. That game, to me, I think South Carolina will probably go into that game, I don't know, like 16.5-point underdog, something like that. That game, to me, for whatever reason, I could see South Carolina, like, it would not surprise me if South Carolina went to Oklahoma and pulled off the upset. For the simple fact that we know Beamer's going to want to win that game badly. He will pull out every trick out of his sleeves if he has to win that game, number one. But number two, how does Oklahoma adjust to playing an SEC schedule, knowing that you're going up against teams that, are playing defense, right? I mean, it might not necessarily be like the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, but because teams are airing the ball out a little bit more and defenses aren't the same way as they once were. But it's not the Big 12. I can see that being the upset. Again, Oklahoma will probably be 16.5, if not more, point favorite. If you had to tell me today, I don't know if Vegas does it like right now, and they put the lines out for each game this far out, but I could see that. I could see that being the upset. So, of those three, again, it'll be tough. Ole Miss, Alabama, you'll start to see an identity. I'd probably say 1 and 2 in the month of October. I'm going to go with the upset against Oklahoma.
Interesting, Mike. I think you upset Ole Miss. That game's also a coin toss for me. I think, if the defense can, keep up with this Ole Miss offense, stay in shape. I mean, I think the off week helps a little bit to regain some rest from those first 4 weeks, but you got to keep up with it. I think there's just so much atmosphere in that, so much going into that game. And I mean, if you can get it flexed into a night game, oh my goodness, that stadium is going to be rocking. And I think you would want it to be a night game if you're South Carolina, because get the fans a little extra time to tailgate, make the place a little bit louder. I think
get lubed up a little bit. Have a couple cold ones. Get lubed up.
Yeah, no. So I got Alabama. Or I think then you go on the road to Alabama and Oklahoma. I think those are two trap games. You're going to be 5 for me at least 5-2 through this run. Look
at you, 5-2. JoJo's ready to go.
Yeah, I know. Well, you could very well lose all 3 of these games right here.
Oh yeah,
like very easily. These are the best teams in the country, quite literally, like the best teams in your conference. Like all 3 of these teams are competing for an SEC championship. So, I mean, and Oklahoma's maybe a little bit more stretched this season, but again, they're all 3 of those teams are elite level programs. So, yeah, I mean, 5-2. There's a way that you can squeak past one of these teams or find a way to win one of these games. Mike, I also have like a weird stigma against conference games at noon on the road. I think every single time you just come out flat, man. You come out flat. It's so hard to come out with a lot of energy on a noon or 1 o'clock kick on the road in the SEC, especially when you have to travel as far to Tuscaloosa and Oklahoma. Like, it's a long trip, and to be fully ready to go at noon after traveling all that way, no matter when you get there. If you get there Thursday night, you got all day Friday, whatever. It doesn't matter. I still have a stigma, on that on the rest of that season.
So I want to bring this up because Craig mentioned it, just how difficult Oklahoma's schedule is. You see, I'm going to make sure I can scroll this down a little bit. You see that they play Tennessee, and then they're at Auburn. They have an off week. They play Texas, and then they play your Gamecocks before playing Ole Miss the following week. With where South Carolina's game is, I mean, these are the type of games that we talk about where, a team has to play a tough team the week before, and certainly South Carolina will be doing that too because they're going to be playing Alabama. And then the following week, though, they have to play another top 10 team. Heading into that, never mind the fact that the Red River rivalry is a big deal for Oklahoma, but add in the fact that Texas could very well be in the top 5. They're obviously ranked number 4 right now, but top 5, and then Ole Miss could be a top 5 team playing you the following week after you play South Carolina. So you kind of hope that you catch Oklahoma at a time where they start to, they're licking their wounds a little bit after a tough game against Texas. They got to play you, but they also know afterwards that they could be playing another top 5 team in the country. So maybe maybe they're paying attention a little bit too much to what's going on the following week. So I don't hate the timing for South Carolina, but again, Joe, as you alluded to, it will be one of those things that you need to play perfect football. You need to play perfect football if you want to have a chance to win those games. Again, what we're saying right now, we're not trying to do mental gymnastics here. At the end of the day, South Carolina's schedule, it is a gauntlet. That month of October, we just showed you, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma. It's like death row for crying out loud. Like, you're going to have to come out there and bring your A game, no question about it. But I think when you look at it, if you had to pick a game, Joe says Ole Miss, I say Oklahoma, that I think potentially could be the upset. Having said that, let's go to the part of the schedule after that the second bye, which is Texas A&M. So I don't know what it is. I know A&M beat South Carolina last year, and then the year prior at Williams-Brice Stadium, South Carolina was able to take care of the Aggies. They're going through a coaching change. There's been, I want to say, Mississippi State went through about 50 different players. A&M has lost a bunch of players over the last 2 years. So my question is, what type of A&M team are we going to see? Because it just feels like, for whatever reason, people look at A&M and they're just like, hey, you know what? Everything's still going to be smooth sailing. Oh, they have a new coach. Oh, they lost a bunch of players. Oh, no, everything's still be good. That's something to me that I don't get, at least right now. Maybe it'll become clear once we get into September and October, but I don't get it, at least right now. But coming off the bye week, I think South Carolina will have an opportunity to be able to compete against them. Another game that potentially could be an 8 o'clock game, but you see that flex at 6 or 8 o'clock. Thoughts on A&M?
My thoughts on A&M, I've got them winning that game. I think it's a home game. A&M is going to have a very up and down season in year one with their new head coach. So I've got them winning that one. I've got them winning the next one. I think the real challenge in this next bank of scheduling is Missouri, right? You got Missouri and Clemson. Those are the 2 games that I'm highlighting in this next bank, because I think you beat A&M. I think that's a big win. No matter how the October stretch happens, I think you're going to have a big bounce back win against A&M. Vandy you should beat, and that'll be a fun trip up to Nashville. And then Missouri. You've got Missouri. You've got them at home this year, which is good. And you've got them right where you want them.
They've been a thorn. Good. They've been a thorn in South Carolina's backside.
And Luther's back, man. Luther and Brady Cook are both back. Like they're losing Tyler Beatty, their main running back. But again, their passing game is elite when you return Brady Cook, and Luther Burden's one of the best wide receivers in college football. Like there's no overlooking, there's no overrating. Like, he is really good as advertised, if you will. And then when you bring back that quarterback and Cook, like, things click, and Eli Drinkwitz has done a great job of developing. But yeah, out of the bottom of your schedule, Missouri's probably the biggest challenge. Clemson, and Clemson's always a crapshoot. But yeah, I don't know. Missouri's your biggest foe. last
The
little
thing
break.
about Missouri, so they've won the last 5, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah,
They've won the last 5 against South Carolina. You have to go all the way back to one of my favorite games that I've covered during my tenure at South Carolina, the Michael Scarnecchia monsoon game against Mizzou, which will forever be one of the top football games that I've ever covered during my stretch here, being here since 2016. That game and just the way it stopped and then it started again, the weather, the rain just comes down. It was a gorgeous day to start. Scarnecchia replacing Jake Bentley heading into that week, filling in for him as Bentley was hurt. It was just insane. But having said all that, I slept on Missouri last year. I was dead wrong. And I took a lot of heat for it from Mizzou fans, and rightfully so. I'm not sleeping on Missouri this year. However, if you're the Gamecocks, you're playing this team in late November, mid-November. This is a team that a year ago was in a similar situation that you were a couple of years ago. And what I mean by that is everyone overlooked them, and then they came out of nowhere, right? They did some incredible things. They won 11-2 last year. You look at what USC did 2 years ago. Not a lot of people expected him to do the things that they did, and then guess what? They took off. So where I'm going with this is what you're hoping for is that South Carolina, by the time you play Missouri, that Missouri is a team that isn't able to take that next step after doing the great things that they did last year. Do I think that's going to be the case? No, I think Missouri has a good team. I think Missouri is going to be there. I don't know if they'll finish, top 10 necessarily, but I do, or, have, I think they had 10 wins in the regular season. They went 11-2 overall. I don't know if they'll be able to replicate that, but I still think it's one of the better teams that you'll be playing this year as well. Wofford's interesting. And I know people are going to be like, are you kidding me, Mike? I believe that Wofford does not run the triple option anymore because they have a coaching change that happened not too long ago. I can't remember when that was. If it was a year ago, 2 years ago. Should look it up right now just so that we are all on the same page here because there's going to be some people that are aware of this. Okay. So Sean Watson. Okay. But that always scares me still when you look at a team like Wofford who has a history of running the triple option. And I'm not trying to bring up some PTSD here. What took place against Navy years ago. R.L. Smith, Mike, are you kidding me, Wofford? I think I have PTSD when I hear anything about schools, even though they don't run the triple option, I don't believe anymore. That's the only reason it scares me. They should beat the crap out of Wofford. My mind, when I look at Wofford and I think of teams triple option, I think about that Navy year. I think about the triple option. I don't know. It scares me. Again, they don't run it, I don't believe anymore, but it's tough for me to look at them knowing that they ran it. And I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But should be able to win that game. And then, of course, you close out the year against Clemson on the road. Think about Clemson, which is going to be interesting. We saw the ups and downs that they went through last season. Cade Klubnik didn't have the greatest year. You wonder if he'll be able to bounce back at all this season, heading into his second year. So to me, that's the big thing when we're talking about playing Clemson. What type of offense is Clemson going to be able to have this season? Obviously, you got to go on the road. South Carolina was able to beat them on the road 2 years ago. But at that point, end of the year, plenty of football before that. Let's see. Peyton asked about Terry Bowden, if he's over with the Zips. Terry Bowden, he last coached the Zips in 2018. He was a grad assistant at Clemson from 19 to 20. Louisiana Monroe from 2021 to 2023. So I'm trying to see. I don't know if he's gone back and and is doing anything. Let's see. I want to make sure. All right, so it doesn't believe. I don't believe so. I don't believe so, Peyton, because I always think of that. Again, not trying to give people PTSD of that Navy year. Even the Citadel, less than 10 years ago. I think that may have been what, nine years. But triple option teams, man, they've been a thorn in the backside of the Gamecocks. So even if they don't run it anymore, I still view Wofford as a triple option team, kind of like Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech doesn't run it, but I still think of them as a triple option team. All right, so again, I'll have my official prediction once we get into fall camp. But looking at it, and I think I said this on another show today, I could see South Carolina from a regular season standpoint somewhere between that 6 to 7 win mark. 6 to 7 win mark. It's tough for me. Never mind the schedule itself. It's tough for me to say anything higher than 7 in the regular season, even if this was a team that was playing, I don't know, say Florida in there instead of, I don't know, Oklahoma or Alabama or Ole Miss. Where I'm going with this is I think that historically being able to get to 8 wins in the regular season, it has not been necessarily easy. I think South Carolina in the 100-plus year history of the program, they've only had 13 8-win seasons. But, yeah, that's where I'm looking at. I think around that 6.5 mark. And, again, that's regular season. So I could see them getting to 7 wins. But doing the exercise there, the point being is there are games there that heading into those weeks, fans won't probably, or experts won't give South Carolina a chance. But I wouldn't be surprised to see USC give them good fights. It comes down to, of course, that defense being as good as we hope they're going to be, on top of Lenore Sellers being as good as what people expect him to be as well.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, the ceiling's 8-9 wins. Certainly doable with maybe some divine intervention. But no, I mean, 8-9 wins is certainly the ceiling for me. I'm with you. 6-7 wins is a little bit more realistic, but we'll get into it and we'll see for sure.
All right, let's hit some ads. We'll wrap things up here on this Talking Tuesday, JoJo.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. This week's episode of GC Live Talking Tuesdays is brought to you by Andy Ludicky at myperfectfranchise.net. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Contact Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. You can reach him via the phone as well, 404-973-9901. Once again, for those listening, 404-973-9901. Give Andy a call for all of your franchising needs.
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond over at Movement Mortgage. Trying to find a new place, trying to find the lowest rate on the market. It's been tough those last 2 years. We'll do exactly what our very own Wes Mitchell did, as well as former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth did. He picked up the phone and he gave Clint a call. That number is 803-422-6797. Now, before we wrap things up on this Talking Tuesday, mentioned at the beginning of the show, the elephant in the room. Many of you who follow me on social media, follow me on Gamecock Central. I made the announcement last Thursday. I have accepted a full-time job in Rhode Island at WPRI, CBS/Fox affiliate, to be closer to home, number one, but number two, have a chance to cover all those Boston teams. I saw some of the comments on the message board that made me laugh. I think I appreciate a lot of them. One said that Juve is worse than and I'm paraphrasing, Juve is worse than a 17-year-old kid trying to make his decision with colleges. He keeps flip-flopping. This is different in the situation in Boston. For many of you, you know that Boston situation, that was a temporary thing. God bless Brian Shoemaker, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, all my colleagues over at GC. They allowed me to go up there knowing that I would be back once football season was done. That's why I stayed on board. And essentially I had like 2 full-time jobs. This time around, a little different. This time, this is a full-time job up north, and I will be freelancing for Gamecock Central. I talked to Brian Shoemaker. I talked to Wes. I talked to Chris. I talked to the guys, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to be doing this. I'd love to be able to stay on in some capacity because I feel like, the relationships I've built down here, it's not going to go away because anyone that knows me knows that I'm a relationship guy. I like to talk to people. Could be the bartender, it could be the bouncer, it could be the janitor, whoever. I value relationships. So definitely we'll want to continue to keep those relationships and continue to cover Gamecock football. And we'll see how things go this fall. And hopefully we'll be continuing to cover the Gamecocks after football season as well. But I'll be here at least through football season as a freelancer. I'll be writing, a little bit less stories. What happens with these GC Live shows, the ones that Joe and I do, that's still up in the air. We'll figure that out because in my new role, I won't be able to do that as much. So worked out an agreement with Brian Shoemaker. Grateful that he's given me that opportunity. Again, I know there's some people that are probably like, all right, why doesn't he just go up there and just not cover the Gamecocks? Well, 2 reasons. One, just like anything in life, right? We all got to pay the bills and got to make sure we're looking out for our family and stuff. Like, gonna make some extra bucks here. Like that helps out a long way, right? I think anyone would say you're crazy if you had an opportunity to do that and turn that down. Number 2, I love covering SEC football. I love it. Like I said, I'm heading into my 9th season of covering the Gamecocks, 10th season of covering SEC ball. And who knows where this will lead me. I have aspirations of covering sports on a pretty big level. And that's not to say Gamecock Central isn't big. I enjoy it, but I really want to, see where this TV thing can go. And I've been doing it obviously for a long time. So I felt like the window was closing, and everything kind of aligned with the fact of, like I said, there's things going on, personal life. My grandfather hasn't been doing that great. He's getting older. He'll be like 96 this fall. So, I want to be closer to home. So that's what it is. But I'm very grateful. So, try to answer some of that stuff. R.L. Smith, Juva's hitting the transfer portal to be closer to home. Please respect his decision.
I like Craig's comment. It was pretty good.
Where's that one?
Enjoy shoveling your driveway. Yeah, pretty good.
Bring it. We got the South Carolina girlfriend coming on up. She just wants me to make sure I get her a jacket, some boots, winter hat.
Brooks
for
sure,
yeah, because if not, oh yeah, she'll enter the portal and just come right back to South Carolina.
Congratulations, Mike. Thank you for everything that you've done for me, obviously, and super pumped to still have you on part of the team as well. But yeah, did want to say congratulations. Thank you again, and appreciate it. We've had so much fun on GC Live, and hopefully we can make a couple guest spots. Maybe come down, be a guest on my show. We'll kick it back. For time's sake, for sure.
Yeah, we'll be discussions over the next couple of weeks as far as what things are going to look like. Maybe I'll let Joe just kind of, announce those because kind of giving the keys over to Joe, whether that be the GC Live post game show, these shows on Tuesdays. Wes and Chris will still be doing their shows, but there will be some changes. But the big thing that we're trying to do is, and we've had a couple of weeks to be able to set this up, is trying to make this transition as easy as possible for everyone over at GC, because with me, I'm going to be starting, I think, like August 7th, but I made a promise to Shu that I wanted to stay down here, help them out on, because my new role with Gamecock Central will begin August 1st, but I'll be down here still. So I anticipate, covering media day the same way I would if I was in a full-time role, and covering practice the next day, August 2nd, all that stuff. So it'll be a quick turnaround, but it'll be worth it because, I'm grateful to still be able to work with GC. It's grateful to still be able to interact with you guys, and be sure to reach out, Twitter, Gamecock Central, message me, whatever. If you're heading up for the Boston College game, if I'm off that night, I intend on driving up to Chestnut Hill to watch South Carolina play Boston College. And or I hope you guys know, goes without saying, I'll be pulling for Mr. Quarterzip. All right. So just because I'm going back up there, anyone that knew me, not to get too sidetracked here, I didn't grow up a Boston College fan. I grew up a Notre Dame fan. That kind of went out the window, though. So a couple of years ago in South Carolina, played ND. I wasn't, going Rudy. Kind of grew out of that, but there's no college teams really up there. Boston College just didn't have any interest in them. So I'll be pulling for the Gamecocks. That's for sure. Any final thoughts, Joe, before we wrap things up on anything? Could be anything. Could be football. It doesn't have to be about, this jabroni over here in the hat.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it. Congratulations again. Super grateful for you and all that. And, certainly excited for what the future holds, whatever that may be. We're certainly working through it right now and trying to figure out what the schedule looks like, everything post Mike. But yeah, I mean, we're that close to football, Mike. We're so close we can almost taste it, right? So big things coming for Gamecock Central, hopefully, in these next couple weeks as we're figuring it out as we go. But so close to football, and it stinks we're losing you right before we kick off this next season. But again, congratulations, and I'm looking forward to whenever I can come up there and visit on one of these bye weeks or something. Man, I come freeze my butt off up there.
No, it's minus the cold. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm gonna definitely miss a lot of things down here, a lot of people, a lot of great food. But I'm certainly gonna miss Saturdays in Columbia, South Carolina, because there's nothing like it during football season. Appreciate everyone that tuned in today. If you missed any of our show, we talked not just about my dumb self. We talked about plenty with the Gamecocks. We talked about a couple players, returners, offensive guys, who are guys that are getting overlooked, who are going under the radar. We talked about those players. We also talked about the schedule for South Carolina, went through it, tried to give you at least a better sense of why you should feel one way or another about some of these games. And we sprinkled in some other things in there too, including Shane Beamer getting set to talk to the media on Thursday following Birdies with Beamer. We'll also have an opportunity to catch up likely with some of the positional coaches, including the coordinators, because that has been the way it's been done in the past. Fingers crossed that will be the way it will be on Thursday this week as well. And then next week, the Gamecocks report for fall camp August 1st. They have their big media day. That's when we have a chance to be able to hear more from Beamer, some of the other positional coaches, as well as practically every player on the team as well. And practice number 1 is set to kick off on Friday, August 2nd. So it hasn't officially been announced yet, but that's what we've been told. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. If you missed this show, head on over to the YouTube page, subscribe to the page for free, hit the little bell notification icon so you get notified every single time one of these shows drop, as well as any other original Gamecock Central content. Hint, hint, next Friday, practice, we'll have highlights up for you. Sights and sounds, that'll be my final sights and sounds, I believe, that I'll be doing, at least for now. That'll be up on the website. Or if you're a podcast listener, head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. I have one more show in me. I have one more GC Live show in me next Tuesday, at least. And we will go from there. And just grateful for all you guys. It's been a blast. The show's not over. Things are changing up a little bit, but I'll still be covering the Gamecocks. He's intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week.